welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker and I are continuing our list of team windows, whether or not you think your team is a Stanley Cup contender, just a playoff contender, or full-on rebuilding. You can go back and you can listen to our first episode where we go through teams 31 to 25 on our list. That's our previous episode. Justin has the list. I am picking it apart, and I have my own categories. And so we will continue with team number 24, the last team that we just got done doing. Justin had the San Jose Sharks ranked at 25. I vehemently disagreed. I put them probably somewhere more like 16 or 15. So it's quite a difference there, which is what we like.
Yeah, absolutely.
We like some good disagreement. But let's continue on. Number 24, probably a team that is still rebuilding.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say still rebuilding.
Hopefully you're not about to put the Boston Bruins at 24 or something.
Although their window is, I think, shrinking a little bit.
Stop.
But no, 24 for me. Chicago Blackhawks. Because I think their window is closing super quick. They've got, when you look at the back end, right? I mean, they're big guys back there. Duncan Keith, Brett Seabrook, they're on their way out. Seabrook's basically ineffective at this point. I mean, let's just be honest, call it what it is. They do have, a nice prospect in Anna Boquist. Connor Murphy, I thought maybe he could be like the next number 2 guy to play alongside Duncan Keith, but that didn't really pan out. And as long as you got Patrick Kane, you'll always have a chance, I think, at being a potential playoff team, which is why I think this team's window is very, very small, and why I think this team is going to take a little bit longer to rebuild than most other teams, because I think as long as Taves and Kane are there...
Well, you've got DeBrincat.
Right. And you do have nice complementary pieces around them. While it's not enough to get them over the hump to compete, I think that it's just going to keep Stan Bowman from saying, okay, we need to rebuild, right? I think that's just going to keep him hesitant, because he does. I think it's like the Red Wings were, 5-6 years ago when they made the playoffs 3 years in a row with Datsuk and Zetterberg still there, aging out. But they thought, okay, if we go out and get like one guy in the offseason, sign him to a, overpay for him, or if we make one little trade here, we can beat Tampa in the first round, which never happened. So, I think that's where Chicago is at this point, where they're going to be just middling in terms of, are we making the playoffs? Are we going to hit rebuild? So.
Yeah, I mean, there also is the fact that you've got Dylan Strome, you've got Adam Boquist, a DeBrincat, you have Kirby Dach, who they took 3rd overall.
Yeah, I really like him, and I think he's going to turn out to be a really nice, potential number 2, number 1B type center guy.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't put up big numbers this year. He's got 11 points in 42 games, but it's fine. I think he's probably rushed.
I do too,
to the
absolutely.
NHL, but at this point, there's really not much pressure in terms of we have to make the playoffs this year. I think everyone knew they'd miss the playoffs. They are just beginning a rebuild to me, but I can see this team, depending on where they end up finishing in the standings. Again, they'll probably end up with something around the 10th overall pick. Give or take. That's probably not a player who's coming and playing for you next year. But is this a team that I could see making the playoffs next year? Sure. They could do something. I mean, they are a team that players want to go play there. Chicago's a good city to go and play in and live in. I think that as we move towards the end of some of these bigger contracts that have been signed, I think there's a chance that you could see, like right now, Brent Seabrook on long-term injury. Maybe he just stays there.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, it seems like there may be some relief coming in the future. At least they've got they have $8 million in cap space for next year without an increase in the cap at all, which we know there will be some. Probably $3 or $4 million in the cap.
Yeah, absolutely.
With Seattle coming into the league and all that too. Then the following year, I mean, you're looking at $22 million. So they're about to get some relief. Like some of these bigger contracts are going to be coming off the books soon, and I think that Chicago, as long as Kane is there, and the young pieces that they've already been able to bring in, they've essentially like kind of done a little bit of a rebuild without feeling like they're horrible.
Right. That's a good way to put it.
They aren't awful. They just aren't good enough to make the playoffs. They just don't have the depth. Like Patrick Kane just can't do everything.
I know, right?
But I mean, they just had a 3rd overall pick last year. Fortunately for them.
Yeah, and they could win the lottery again this year.
Unfortunately for the Red Wings.
I know, right? Red Wings 2 years in a row at number 6. One of the worst teams in the league. Just
yep.
How?
At least you're not the Ottawa Senators and didn't have a pick at all.
I know, right? That's brutal.
Okay, yeah. So the Blackhawks, I guess they're a team. I would say that out of any of the rebuilder teams that I have, they're the biggest wild card because I could see in 1 year they could go from being bad to the right things happen. They sign the right guys, they draft the right guys, and suddenly this team looks like they could contend for a top spot in the Central. I think they have the shortest window the shortest amount of time to rebuild based on the players that they already have. So,
all right. Yeah. Good deal. Well, next on my list at 23, a team that has one guy who I think can either put them in the playoffs or put them at the bottom of the league, and that is the Montreal Canadiens.
Okay, Montreal.
Yeah. Now, I will say the nice thing for them is, yes, they do have Carey Price. However, he hasn't looked Carey Price-esque that much over the last 3 seasons. Last year, he did show.
Last year, he was fine.
Yeah, he was okay, but this year, not so good. I haven't been thoroughly impressed with him. I mean, he's floating at a .909 save percentage right now. But they do have some nice prospects coming up. Their farm system looks pretty decent.
I like Carl Alsner in the farm system.
Right. Cole Caulfield. I really like this guy that they got last year who fell all the way to the middle of the draft at 15th overall and who was the best goal scorer, in my opinion, in the entire draft. So they got lucky with that. Kotkaniemi, he looks like he could potentially be a pretty decent center, whether he's going to be
top 6 forward. Yeah.
I mean, what kind of center you're going to get out of him, who knows? But Noah Juleson, Nick Suzuki, Noel Jolson, they have some nice young pieces, right? But the problem is,
Ilya Kovalchuk, nice young piece.
Who's been like the best player in the last 7 games. He's at a point per game pace. He cracks me up. But I mean, so this is the team that, to me, they need to accept a rebuild at this point and say, okay, we've got these really, really nice young pieces that we've acquired in the draft over the last couple seasons. Let's just call it what it is, say we're rebuilding, and then just go for it, right? But instead, because they've got aging guys like Carey Price and Shea Weber, I don't think they're ready to accept that, and I think they're trying to compete every year where maybe they shouldn't, right? And just call it what it is.
Yeah, they've got $16 million in cap space next year, probably more like 20 when all is said and done. And,
right.
And really, that's losing. No, you have to re-sign Max Domi. Max Domi's probably going to get $7 million.
He'll be up there for sure. Absolutely.
He has been benched. Maybe he's more like a 6.5. But
still, you've got to. I mean, he's going to get a raise. There's no doubt about it.
But everyone else coming off, like a Dale Weiss, Nate Thompson, Marcos Candela, all those guys are gone.
Yeah. But then the problem is the year after that, now you've got to start re-signing guys like Kotkaniemi. And I mean, what are you going to, give him? And so, you've got to think, I guess, long-term with this. And, Brandon Gallagher, to me, he's a heart and soul type guy who, if Shea Weber wasn't there, he would be the captain of this team. What do you do with him?
He's saying that he makes $3.7 million
I know,
a year.
the best bargain in the NHL. And so what are you going to do with that guy? Because, I mean, honestly, if you're Brandon Gallagher, yeah, Montreal's a nice spot and you're well-respected and well-liked, but you're not competing for a Stanley Cup in the next few seasons, so do you go somewhere else because you're a UFA?
Sure.
Or do they throw a lot of money at him and give him $9 million and he stays there?
$9 million. He's like probably a 60-point guy.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, absolutely.
He could probably, on the open market, you're looking at, like...
He could get Kevin Hayes money, $7 million. Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
7 and 7.
He's not a center, though. But.
No, not a center, but I would still give him 7 and 7 just because of all the intangibles, too, he brings.
I have Buffalo as my most bubble team of between playoff contender and rebuilder. I don't think that they can be considered a rebuilder as long as they have Carey Price. Although, as I say that, I realize that I do have one other team left in my rebuilder list. And that team has probably the other best goaltender from the last 15 years. So you'll figure out who that is real quick. It's hard. But you go combination of Carey Price plus Shea Weber, And then, you've got Brendan Gallagher. You do have some nice pieces. I don't think this team's rebuilding. I don't know if they're ever going to go into like full on, let's try and get the first overall pick kind of rebuild.
I don't think the city will ever let them. I don't think Montreal ever wants that.
I don't think that they need to. Although, that's what everybody said about Toronto. And when they finally did it, people were like, yes, I've been waiting for them to do this. Like, we just needed to be bad for a minute and like kind of restart. But I don't know if they're in a position to where they need to hit the reset button because they've been able to acquire some nice pieces in other deals. I think they're going to miss the playoffs here. They got to start hitting on some of these first round picks. You're right. Let's see what this last year's first round pick ends up being. I know he was touted as being this fantastic goal scorer, Cole Caulfield. Let's see how that plays out in the NHL. But yeah, that's really the key is they've got to start hitting on some of these first round picks, and they need to be better than just a guy that you bring up and they end up playing in your bottom six.
All right.
Okay, so there's Montreal. Let's with number 22. Okay.
Yeah, I have the Buffalo Sabres. Okay. At 22.
All right.
I think, the one thing that puts them, they're another team like Montreal where they're at that point where they just need to say, okay, we need to go rebuild again, or we can potentially make the playoffs, right? They've got
everyone's a free agent.
I know. I was going to say they don't have a ton of contracts that are long term outside of Kyle Okposo, which I bet they wish they could just get rid of him now. But as long as they have Jack Eichel, as long as they have Rasmus Dahlin, I think they're fine. You can figure out everything else around those two guys for sure, and so you can find a way for this team to compete every single year as long as you have those two guys. And having a Ristolainen now isn't so bad when you have him when you actually have a number one defenseman in Dahlin. They have Yoki Haru, who looks like he should be okay, and acquiring Colin Miller was a nice move. Like, they have some good pieces. It's just from the forward position, it's been all Jack Eichel. I mean, they've scored 144 goals. It's just not going to get the job done when all is said and done. Out of all the playoff teams, only one of them, and that's the Islanders, who play insane defense in the Eastern Conference, has scored less goals than them. And I guess Columbus too. Yeah, and having Jeff Skinner on IR doesn't help much with that. He's a guy that does worry me a little bit, right, in terms of long term, because he hasn't looked like himself, but maybe that was part of the injury right there. Victor Olofsson, he looks like he could be a pretty nice, complimentary top six winger to have on this team. I mean, he for sure can score on the power play because that's how he scored his first 25 goals this season. Yep. So
I think this team is about to have a big facelift, though. I mean, you're going Frolik, Sheary, Vesey, Gergensons, Larson, and Scott Wilson, all UFAs on the forward side. And there goes, probably four or 5 year forwards. My guess is that Connor Sheary doesn't re-sign in Buffalo. He hasn't been a great fit. VC, there's no doubt that he's going to leave. No doubt, because of the way that he came into the league. He's looking forward to being able to go where he wants to go.
Yeah, I agree. And I think too, they've got a lot of cap money, right? I think they've got close to 33 million.
Yeah, probably. So probably 36.
Sure. And I mean, granted, you do have to give Sam Reinhart some money. But again, he's making $3-ish million now, so I don't really see that going more than, $6-7 million to get him re-signed. Maybe a touch more, but
probably by the end of the year he'll have 70 points. So
yeah, but again,
a 70-point guy, you're looking at $7 to $7.5 million. Probably.
Okay, you give them 7 and 7 or whatever. But regardless, they've still got lots of money they can go out and spend. So maybe you go out and you go get a Kevin Shattenkirk, who's looked pretty good in Tampa Bay, or maybe you go out, sign a guy Evgeny Dandanov. Maybe he doesn't re-sign in Florida. Now you got a guy who can be a decent second line winger to score some, give you some complimentary scoring, as long as you don't give him a ton of term. But
right, as long as you got a guy like Jack Eichel, people are going to at least consider coming if they're high. I mean, that's why Jeff Skinner signed there.
Exactly.
Knowing he was going to, it doesn't help that he's been hurt. That has certainly killed the Buffalo Sabres. They just don't have any secondary scoring.
Right.
So yeah, they're middling, and they've been middling. I have them forever chasing a playoff spot. That's where I have them.
Chasing a playoff spot.
Well, the last time they made the playoffs, 2010 or something like that?
Gosh, Ryan Miller era.
Yes. The Sabres are just no good. They haven't made the playoffs since Lindy Ruff was their coach.
Yeah, good call.
Okay, let's go number 21.
Yeah, 21 for me, the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Okay.
Yeah, this one was a hard one to rank them because they're a team that consistently competes for the playoff spots, and each year when they get in with the way Torts coaches and what they have on the back end, they can potentially be an upsetter, right? We saw it last year with Tampa Bay. Now, granted, they don't have Panarin, they don't have the scoring up front, and I think that is probably why I rank them a little bit lower because, they maybe need to go out and get a few pieces. Their window's a little bit smaller because one, I'm not sure I trust their goaltending. Korpisalo is fine.
Yeah, I mean, long term, they're going to need to go find someone.
Yeah,
right.
But you've got Werenski, you've got Seth Jones, you've got David Savard, Ryan Murray on the back end. I don't know if they're going to keep him long term or if they're going to deal him or what's going to happen with that. But you've got pieces back there, right? You've got guys you can hang on to and play good defense, solid minutes for you. You don't really have to worry, and makes it a little bit easier when you do have mediocre goaltending, right? So now you don't have Bobrovsky in there to steal games for you anymore, and now you maybe rely a little bit more on scoring up front. So that's where my biggest concern is and why I have them down at 21.
Thing is, their defense has still been great. I mean, the only team better than them in the Eastern Conference is the Islanders in terms of goals against. So they have been good defensively. It's just the problem is they also can't score. They have the least amount of goals out of any team in the playoffs outside of the Dallas Stars are the only team who has scored less goals, 2 fewer goals, but the Stars have also allowed 13 fewer goals too. So that's nice. There's the difference. And that is there's the goaltending. The Stars have 2 number 1 goalies, and Columbus has none. Right,
and well, that's the thing too. You look at I think it was the other day I was listening to NHL radio, and they were talking about the top 5 teams in the NHL in terms of goals against per game. All 5 of them had 1As and 1Bs. Right, you look at Boston with Halak and Rask, Dallas. I mean, all these teams that were so good with. And Pittsburgh, for instance, they're another example, right? They've got Tristan Jarry and Matt Murray. All these teams that are successful have
Arizona
pairings. Yeah. They've got really good pairings in goal, and I think now
Toronto.
Pairings in goal. Yeah, we're going to see Anderson play every game for the rest of the season.
The Leafs have given up by far the most goals out of any playoff team. So
yeah. Luckily for them, they're a little higher on my list than Columbus. So
I would hope so. There is one team that we haven't gotten to yet that I had in my rebuilding spot. So we're rolling through my playoff contender. I have Columbus as a playoff contender, and I just think that they are ultimately, because of their defense, because of like Werenski and Jones and Savard and Nudivara and when Murray's healthy, Ryan Murray, that they have a really nice top 4, and that top 4. And their system with Tortorella is making them be able to be contenders. On top of the fact that, hey, Pierre-Luc Dubois is turning out to be a Ryan Johansson type. I almost feel bad that I use his name as my you're like the 28th best first line center in the league, like that kind of guy. Like
right,
Dubois is probably not going to be your top 10 center in the league. But can he be a part of a good 1-2 punch if you find yourself with other center guys that can push the needle the other way? Yeah, he can be a serviceable and above average type of center in the top 6. But ultimately, I look at this team and I go, well, Cam Atkinson, he's 30 years old. Nyquist, he's 30. Foligno, he's 32. Riley Nash is 30. Like, a lot of their forwards are on the other side of 30, and that ultimately isn't going to be good for them. I mean, even like a Dubinsky, he's 33. Still got another year left on his deal after this year. This team is probably they are a lot like the Minnesota Wild. Ironically, they come in at the same time. They're a lot like the Minnesota Wild, where but they look like the Minnesota Wild like 5 years ago.
Okay.
Where you're like, okay, yeah, they have some really nice pieces. They've got a good defense core. They have some forwards that can push the needle. But are they ever going to win a cup? Hell no.
Right.
This team is not going to win the cup.
I would never put money on it for sure. Yeah.
No, they're not going to win the cup. I mean, yeah, any team can get lucky, I suppose. But when you look at the last 15 years, what team got lucky in the last 15 years? The St. Louis Blues. And even then, at the beginning of the year, they were Stanley Cup contenders. They just happened to get lucky in terms of the amount of games they won
Just
after
rebounding.
January.
Yeah.
Yes. But, I mean, you look at the rest of them, you go like, well, the year Boston won, they're one of the one-offs. Like any team that won the Cup 2 times, they obviously didn't just get lucky.
Right.
So Chicago, Pittsburgh, LA, they didn't just get lucky. They were doing it the right way. I mean, Anaheim's a one-off, but their team had
They were still a contender every
Hall
year.
of Fame defensemen, and
Right.
they basically added Chris Pronger, and that was the boost they needed. But Columbus isn't. That's the other side of it, is that Columbus really isn't probably going to add heavy superstars to their lineup, because who wants to live in Columbus, Ohio?
Nobody.
Like it's not a bad place to live. I mean, I'd say that it's pretty comparable to living in in Metro Detroit. They're pretty it's pretty similar. You're kind of off the beaten path a little bit. You're actually more off the beaten path in Detroit than you are in Columbus.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But it's not really, it's not close to water. It's not close to very many cool things.
A lot of farms outside of Columbus.
Yeah. So to me, it's a place where guys happily go, and they live. Like a lot of guys, I think, who retire, they actually stay in Columbus because it's a great place to live. People like living there, but they like living there because of their family. It's a good place to raise kids. That's not what a 26-year-old UFA is thinking, or 27-year-old UFA usually.
Right. You
Usually
want big
these
city
guys
life
don't have.
and-
Yes.
Yeah, you want the excitement, right? For sure.
Or you want to be close to the water.
right. Which
So
is also
it's
nice.
just the location isn't as desirable. Therefore, they're probably not going to reel in heavy UFAs. So now you're relying on their drafts, and they just haven't. Well, they gave up all their draft picks.
Right. I was going to say they lost them all last year.
Now they do have a first, but they have no second and third this year,
Yeah, which makes it tougher because now you've got to be really, really good in those latter rounds.
and no second next year.
Right.
So it's going to be a matter, and there's really not a lot of like, oh yeah, we could move that guy, because they're not trying to move players. So you're not bringing in picks for guys. So to me, I think they're a team. They're going to compete for the playoffs for the next several years, but they're not going to be Stanley Cup contenders. And eventually, maybe they hit on some draft picks and they're able to turn around, or they don't, and then they fall into that rebuild spot. But
Okay.
it's where I'd have the Blue Jackets.
Fair enough. All right. Well, number 20 for me, probably the last team on your rebuild.
There we go.
But to me, I love the pieces they have, and I think like within 2 years, their window is going to be ginormous, and that's the New York Rangers. They have so many good pieces, in my opinion. They've got a potential just like Nashville-esque type, you've got a 1, 2, 3, 4 punch that's just phenomenal with Jacob Trouba, Brady Shea, Anthony D'Angelo, Adam Fox. These guys could just be superstars. All of them could, you could potentially say that at one point they could be contenders for Norris, a couple of these guys down the road. And then you look up front. I mean, you've got already a guy who drives a line in Panarin, who's just blowing out New York Ranger team records with his production this year, the way he's putting up points. Capo Caco, I think in a couple years is just going to be in his prime, and he's just going to be a stud on the wing. Now, the one thing they are missing is a center, right? They've got Zibanejad, who's a fine center. He's maybe not your ideal number one center, but he's still a very productive, very, very quality type center now. And then you look at the back end 2 and goal, and they've got, the King, Henrik Lundqvist, of course, but then you still have 2 really, really good prospects in Shurturkins, Igor, I don't even know how to pronounce his last name, and then Gorgiev is
Shosturkin.
Yeah. Both these guys are fantastic, and they're even talking about moving, Alexander Gorgiev because of how good, Igor's been playing, and, they think this kid's the future in their net anyway. So either way, if you stick with, either one of those 2 guys to play alongside Henrik Lundqvist for a few more years, they're going to learn a lot.
Sure, you're in a good position.
They're going to be in a position to contend every year.
They are like one of two rebuilding teams that actually have goaltending depth.
Right.
Like, who are the other ones? Were
New Jersey, Ottawa, Detroit.
Yeah, the other one with the depth was Anaheim with a good goaltender.
Yeah,
already.
Absolutely.
Like, they were really the only other one. I mean, when you look at Detroit, you're like, Ottawa, they've got nothing coming.
Right.
New Jersey's got nothing really coming. Mackenzie Blackwood, maybe, who is good enough to keep you rebuilding for a while. I guess.
Right.
LA Kings, they do have some names, but and maybe their goaltending isn't as bad as it actually looks. Just the team in front of them so bad.
Sure,
that's a possibility. But really, I think it's Anaheim and New York. Are the teams with the goaltending future.
The Rangers have 3 potential starters on their roster right now.
Yeah, and Georgiev kind of came out of nowhere last year.
Yeah,
and I think they always knew that Shesterkin was the guy who was going to come in and
that was the plan. He was the guy outside of the NHL that was looked at as like the next big thing.
Right. But yeah, Georgiev a year younger than him, and I know that there's been. I mean, we know the Leafs have talked to them about bringing Georgiev in. I don't know what the price tag for a guy like that
it'll be a
would
first round pick.
I don't know. I think they're going to want a roster player.
Maybe they want a prospect, right? Maybe they want a decent center prospect, some guy who could potentially be a number 2 type center. So you have, this 2A, 2B.
I just don't think that anyone's given that up for a goaltender.
Depends how desperate you are, I guess, right?
I really don't. I can't think of a team in the league that would give up a forward prospect that they thought was going to be a surefire top 6 forward for the goaltender. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, maybe a winger, but you could look at maybe a team like Carolina, right? Who in a couple years, are you going to be still holding on to Reimer and?
Well, I'm thinking like if you're in New York, would you take Kasperi Kapanen for Georgiev? Like, to me, he's the guy.
Yeah, maybe
Kapanen. Out of anyone on the Leafs, Kapanen's the one guy that I think you look at and you go, okay, there's not really a place for you. Like, I think that he probably could be a top 6 forward. He's definitely a top 9 forward. He could probably be a top 6 forward, but when you look at the rest of the guys in that lineup, he, for the most part, doesn't fit. And so he'd be probably the easiest person to shed because of the other guys coming up on the Leafs. Anyways, this is we won't get into that. But I think that Kapanen for Georgiev, because Kapanen could easily slot in. He's shown that he can be a nice complement. I don't think you'd play him with Panarin, but I think that you could play him down. You could play him with like a Ryan Strome. You could play him on the other side of Chris Kreider. You just have that crazy speed line. I think that it would be a good fit with the New York Rangers. So especially, maybe you play him alongside Brett Howden. You just give him that speedy winger to feed the puck to. So.
Yeah. And there's maybe another part of your rebuild too. You can help, bring that playoff contention here even quicker. You deal Kreider for maybe a first rounder or something else, or you re-sign him because this guy he's a freak, right? Super tall, he's got speed, he's got physicality.
I'd re-sign Chris Kreider because I think at this point you're sort of looking at this like, all right, we don't need to finish last place in the league anymore. We've kind of got our team here. I know Elias Anderson, things are kind of weird with him, but
right.
Yeah, you definitely are in a good position. And I mean, this year you're not going to, the chances are you're not going to win the lottery or anything, but you're probably going to end up with somewhere around the 10th pick, which you can stock the cupboards with stuff like that, or you could trade that pick and you could acquire something else that you need. So there's lots of possibilities for the Rangers. I have them as my shortest window to the playoffs. I think they could make the playoffs as soon as next year.
I see that. Yeah.
And then I have them probably another 4 to 5 years before they're Stanley Cup contenders. I'd say 3 years. Like if they can really, like some of these studs, if they hit on everyone that they picked, I could see, based on where I see the rest of the Metropolitan Division and the aging tops of that division, I think there is a chance that they could contend again. But it probably more likely to be 3 or 4 years down the road before they have a legitimate, like, okay, this team could win the Stanley Cup on like an outside chance. I don't think that they're like in 3 years they're going to win the cup, just they maybe would have an outside chance of being one of the top teams in that division, and then you never know. So
I like it.
Okay, let's go number 19.
19. Yeah. For me, that's the Edmonton Oilers. And some people might have them higher on this list because they are essentially sitting in a playoff spot right now, and they have two of the best centers in the NHL. But my biggest concern is, you constantly hear about it. McDavid's given them like 2 or 3 years, and then he might get shipped off somewhere else if they don't do anything. They have no depth outside of those, two guys. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, you could maybe throw his name in there too, but in terms of depth,
definitely Ryan Nugent-Hopkins.
But outside of that, they have nothing on defense. They don't have anything coming up that really, gets me excited about to say, okay, these guys will, have some prospects that can fill in the spots and, make them.
Well, they've got Philip Broberg they took last year.
Yeah, maybe. Well, but we don't really know where he's going to pan out. Evan Bouchard, he has potential to be a pretty decent defensive prospect, but is he going to be a top 4? I'm not really sure yet.
I think Broberg will. I think Broberg will be.
I hope so.
Will be a good defenseman. Of course you're hoping that your 8th overall pick turns out to be a good defenseman.
Right.
Hopefully.
Yeah, and so, again, I think as long as you have McDavid and Draisaitl, you're always going to compete for a playoff spot. Sure. Which is why I have them a little bit higher, and I think the window's still open because both these guys are signed for very long-term deals, but the problem is the depth around them, makes it a little bit harder for them to compete, and that's why they're a little lower on my list. And then too, the goaltending. I'm not sold on, Mikko Koskinen. He's 31, and you know what you're getting at this point. I think you have to, and he's not going to be a game changer at all. He's not going to be a Stanley Cup winning goaltender in my mind.
Sure.
I think they need someone else, so...
Yeah, and they do have some other guys floating around in their organization. I would say that they are a playoff contender because they are. If you have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and Nugent Hopkins, you're trying to make the playoffs. They have okay pieces, and I'm willing to say I'm just looking at the team going, well, they just got a new general manager last year, and he's gonna do what he can do. We'll see it. We'll see how much Ken Holland has changed. The good news is they're not good right now. So that means that he's not going to deal out huge contracts to guys because they have a really good first round of the playoffs or something.
Right. Let's hope he doesn't give Zach Cassian an 8-year deal like he did with Abdelkader, and that turns into another one of those.
Oh,
that would be rough for them.
Or let's hope that he does. That would be fun.
Right. And then I can see McDavid play somewhere else.
Well, he'll give him like a $3 million. He'll do like a Helm deal, 3.75 for like 7 years.
Good grief. Please no.
Also, Kassian is 28 years old, so that's the other side of it.
Well,
okay. So the Oilers, I'd say that they are like the definition of a team that's just kind of trapped in the middle, and I assume they're moving on their way up, like they're trending up, but that could all be changed by. Obviously, if Connor McDavid decides that he doesn't want to play there anymore, you're in deep crap.
The needle is going quickly the other way.
But in reality, he's signed there for another 7 years. So there's only so much you can, you can demand a trade, but what are you going to sit out? No, he's not the guy that's going to sit out.
No, of course not.
I don't see it happen. I think that Holland will be able to give them a good enough team to where they can move into that Stanley Cup contender role.
You hope so, because the playoffs are better with a guy like McDavid in it, right?
Absolutely.
You have to have him.
And especially since he's in a different conference than the team that I root for, I don't mind seeing him in the playoffs every year.
There you go.
Okay, let's go.
Number 18.
Number 18.
Yeah, that's the Philadelphia Flyers for me. This was a team I did struggle with moving them up and down a little bit because they do have that one piece that can really change things around for any franchise, and that is number one goaltender. Carter Hart is going to be that guy for this team, and he's going to be there long term because they are dum-dums if they let him or let somebody else offer sheet him in a couple years. But the biggest issue with the Flyers for me is the fact that their core group of forwards outside of Travis Konechny are a little bit older, right? You've got your Kevin Hayes, Jack Voracek, Giroux, Kevin Hayes. These are all guys. JVR, they're 30, and getting older.
Like Couture, Hayes, they're 27.
Okay,
that's not too bad. But
so yeah. Kevin Hayes, 27. But again, these guys are getting a little bit older, and they they haven't shown that they're going to get any better than they had before. And so when you have a team that is consistently just a bubble team, and your core group of forwards aren't going to get any better at this point, now the 1+2 is outside of the goaltending. They do have a couple nice pieces on defense. Shane Gostisbehere, is he going to turn it back around? But Ian Provorov is always nice. So you have some pieces to work with, and you have a decent prospect pool as well. So
yeah, can like Morgan Frost turn into something?
Right.
The other thing is, can Nolan Patrick actually turn into something? That is really what is just destroying you right now. It's the fact that you get to draft second overall, and that player is not. Yes, he's on their lineup. I know he's hurt right now, but he's got 61 points in 145 games.
It sucks when you look at like the next 3-4 guys after him.
Yes, and the guys you could have had.
Yes,
you could have had Miro Heiskanen, Cale Makar, Elias Peterson, even Cody Glass.
Yeah, I would be better at this point. Absolutely.
All those guys that you could have had that now you missed on because you went Nolan Patrick, which everyone was saying go Nolan Patrick, but it just, and also considering the fact that they did have a lot of defensive prospects in that at that point they probably weren't going to go and reach for Heiskanen or Makar, but it's just too bad you didn't realize that Elias Peterson was going to be the freaking real deal. I
know, yeah, because at the time that's what they needed. They needed a number 2 center to play behind Giroux because they didn't have Couture at the time, and so yeah, how nice would that look if you had Couture, Giroux, and Pettersson all in the same lineup? You'd have the best 1-2-3 punch, I think, in the NHL.
Yep. So I have this team as they are a playoff contender. Obviously, I think they're sitting in a playoff spot right now. They're trending towards becoming Stanley Cup contenders because I think that as some of these younger guys, if any of their forwards can come in and make a difference, it'll be big for this team. I do like the way that Travis Konechny is, I think, really starting to come into his own. And then the defense, all these guys are coming up at the same time. And so I'm glad for them on that. And then you throw in Carter Hart into the mix. Suddenly you have to go, all right, this team could become a Stanley Cup contender. It is totally viable, but I think they have a very short window when they get there. Like, let's say they become Stanley Cup contenders in the next 1 to 2 years. Like, let's say next year we look at them and we go, wow, I think this team actually has a shot, like an outside shot at the Stanley Cup. Well, okay, Giroux is 33, and then how many years do you have left of that? Like, when is Giroux going to dip back down? Because he's already dipped once. Does he dip back down again? How many more good years of Giroux do you have? 3? And maybe your window, you maybe have a 1 or 2 year window.
Right.
Because in reality, their window is open. It will be open if they have Giroux. But if Giroux is gone, it's no more.
Yeah, you can't rely on Couture to carry the load up front, along with Jakob Voracek. It's not going to work.
Yeah, and honestly, though, these teams in this position might be the hardest to detect because, Philadelphia could go either way. They could make the playoffs and they could go on a little run. Like, is it out of the realm of possibility that the Flyers make the playoffs and they somehow sneak through and they win a round or two and find themselves in the conference finals? Yeah, it can happen. But at the same time, could they miss the playoffs this year? Falter at the end? And here we are again talking about the Philadelphia Flyers that can't doesn't seem to be able to...
Can't get over that hump.
Yep, can't get over the hump. Whether it's the playoffs or the first round, can't get over the hump. Well, I think that's it for this show.
Oh, boy.
We've got more window shows coming. If you're enjoying this, let us know. You can hit us up at OT Hockey Talk. We will be just chugging out more Where's Your Team?
We got 17 teams to go.
17 teams to go. We've already done 2 episodes on this, and we were intending to do 1. So, it's a good conversation. Let us know what you thought at OT Hockey Talk on Twitter and Instagram. Enjoy the rest of the week for all those hockey games out there, and we'll talk to you guys.